This week's movie review is Super 8, the latest J.J. Abrams films, and produced by Steven Spielberg, which is important because this film is really trying to capture that early Spielberg film. Everything from setting it to 1979, putting out in the Midwest, involving the army in that particular way that always kind of neutral, but maybe evil, sort of. It's the way that Spielberg did back in the 70s. But it succeeds in that goal. I mean, I was very surprised by just how Spielberg this movie felt. If it wasn't for the CGI, I could even see this movie being made by Spielberg back in the day. And apart from that, it's still a fun film. It's different than what we're used to getting nowadays, where it's the invincible hero type. This film really pretends there's mysticism or some sort of magic to be found in these amazing things. It really tries to treat its special effects like they're special. And I think it's a very good comment, probably not intentionally, on CGI. Before CGI, you couldn't show off monsters and creatures or, do all this other stuff you could do in movies. And therefore, there was concentration on story, character, and when you did see something, it tried to show something as being magical. It tried to really enthrall the audience with it. And that's what this film does. Because J.J. Abrams, you can make some complaints about him and such, but he really gets. I think he's one of the directors and producers who gets kind of how to use CGI. He doesn't get lazy with CGI, which is the key. And this film's kind of the evidence for it, that CGI has just made Hollywood lazy in its filmmaking. The monster in this film is really never seen clearly, even when you kind of see it in full. First of all, 90% of this film, you really see nothing more than something in the background occasionally. You never get a clear look at the monster. The monster also isn't this. He's kind of spiderish like. He's like a kind of. He's got multiple arms and stuff. So when you see him in the background in the silhouette, it's never quite clear how he actually fits and looks. And that's great. It keeps him even when you're kind of seeing him in full vision. There's normally smoke or something else when he's attacking a bus in one scene. It's very smoke and dusty, and he's moving around a lot, so you can't get a clear look at the monster. Before that, though, you really never see the monster at all. Occasionally, maybe you'll see an arm. That's about it. That's how you should do a monster movie. You don't show us the monster. Because nowadays, let's face it, we've all seen creatures. We're not going to get shocked if you put it out. It's not going to be like Jurassic Park. Although that went for a completely different feel. But it's not going to be like a lot of the monster movies today. And J.J. Abrams, you can see that in his other works. Cloverfield, we didn't get a really good look at the creature until the very end. It was always quick shots, no real clear image. An arm here, a massive, not humanity, but a big mass of a creature that we couldn't really make out any definitive features on. Look at Lost. Yeah, he did not show us really. We got quick glimpses of the smoke monster. He all other times he would not show what I guess turned out to be the smoke monster. It's Lost. It's confusing, but he didn't show us a lot there. Even though, especially in later seasons, he had the budget. And that's why he gets it. He gets when to, at least in these films, he gets when to use CGI and when not to. I would have liked for him to have used a little bit more practical effects, maybe try to get some actual arms and stuff, animatronic arms and the ladder. Well, not the ladder, but stuff like that, to be able to portray, especially when he has it. It's one criticism I'm going to have for this film. They could have used more CGI. It's hard to do a train crash, especially on that scale, but I felt the train looked a little out of place because they didn't use that much CGI in the movie. The train did kind of stand out a bit, and I think they could have shot that with an actual prop train. There's tons of abandoned tracks out there. You could have found one, fixed it up, and just started throwing trains off of it. Yes, it would have been more. Well, I don't even know if it would be more expensive. Find some old, dirty trains, put a new layer of paint on them, and then knock them over. It couldn't have cost as much as the CGI. It would have been harder to shoot. It would require more effort, but not necessarily more expensive. Actor-wise, there's really no familiar actors. The closest you have, one person you might recognize, is Kyle Chandler, who I mostly remember from the morning edition or the early edition back in the '90s. Other than that, it's mostly child actors. The child actors are fairly good, except for the character who I'm just gonna call Fat Little J.J. Abrams, the director character, who's not the main character. Going in there, that's what I thought. That's who I kind of thought was going to be the main character, the kid making the film. But to his credit, J.J. Abrams did not put that character as the main focus of the film. The main character is actually Joe Lamb, who is basically on these little film marks. He plays like the makeup guy. He doesn't play the makeup guy. He puts the makeup on everybody. And he does one quick little scene in the movie they're making. Uh, he did a fairly good job. Like I said, actually, the problem with little fat J.J. Abrams was really this: he seemed to know a little too much about filmmaking. He was a little too articulate in his things. Now, maybe you could say, yeah, that's what happened in those early '80s movies too, when they focused on kids. The kids always had to, were more articulate than real kids would be, more clear and concise in their thought, all that stuff. And in that respect, I can kind of buy it. But he kind of is too obsessed with the story and kind of telling all this stuff about why you need to have this character or that character. It's all about the story and all that. I, I, I mean, I suppose there are kids like that, but it felt a little actory to me for a kid that age. But that's a minor complaint. I didn't mind it, and it did feel like it was part of the spirit of this early '80s film. Which, if you think about it, there's really not a whole lot of movies that look at this age range. I guess it's like middle school. They either look at it as being completely ridiculous. I guess we could say that someone in the Spy Kids realm, or they look at it way too serious. Where if it's about it's those independent type films where if it's about kids, it's like seriously looking at the perverse sexuality change occurs at this age, and all this dark and serious shit happens. It's not like the '80s where they just had kids be characters in a fun, not fun, well, yeah, fun, but in a major film. I don't know why they've gotten away from that. Really, they still make a ton of PG-13 movies. PG-13, PG-13 films. They're clearly aimed at that demographic. I don't know why. And as adults, I think we're willing to accept child actors as long as the rest of the film's good. Granted, if you can, a child actor, if they're not too ready to act, can completely mess up a film. That is absolutely possible, but I am kind of perplexed why we got away from that. Did we? I think sometime in the '90s, we started pushing children aside because we felt it made them more mature. It's an interesting observation. This film actually is. I kind of pointed out two things already where this film can kind of make you see how there's changes in filmmaking itself, and that's an talking all over the place today, aren't I? But that's very interesting, and I think as a maybe more in the film academia sort of way, this film is excellent to view to see changes in the film industry over time. Both in you could say its portrayal of the military. Nowadays, we're in a time of war, a war that has it's mixed, but the military itself has high support. So the military, at least the guys in the uniform, normally are shown very respectfully in films, very supportive. It's normally going to be a civilian. If there's shenanigans about it, it'll be a civilian agency or a paramilitary group. That's not the actual Marines, Army, or Air Force kind of doing the bad, shady stuff. While the films back in the '80s, post-Vietnam, things were kind of neutral, maybe slightly suspicious of the military. And while not, bat out evil, even in this film, the one colonel who kind of does all the bad stuff does put effort in when there's the creature's attacking a bus to try to save the kids, even though he's kind of this slight spoiler alert kids are kind of detained. The creature starts attacking the bus. They're taking them back to somewhere, I guess, a detention center, and because the town was quarantined or something. And as the creature's attacking the bus and his men are killed, he tries to get to the back of the bus to let the kids out so they can get away, but he doesn't have the key. And eventually the creature winds up, well, but at least they put that in. They didn't make him a batshit evil guy. He was doing his mission. But it did show, and that's kind of how it was. And nowadays they would have probably had it as a civilian, with the military officer being uncomfortable with the orders he was being issued. And again, that's another example of changing times in both Hollywood's perceptions and such. Probably more so than the military changing, it's Hollywood's perception of the military. Where now it's the actual soldiers are alright and honorable, it's just the orders that they're issued by civilians that are the problem. At least that's my observation. I'm sure other people will have other opinions. I did talk about the special effects a little bit, and I don't think there's much more to talk about it. They were well hidden. They had the creature itself, the design actually. If you want to get an idea of it, it's very kind of Cloverfield-like. In fact, I don't have IMDb open right here, but I'm sure if I did, probably the art director or at least an artist in the credits would probably be the same from Cloverfield. It had that very same style. In fact, I could actually see this film as being part of kind of a Lovecraftian universe. Maybe Abrams is creating himself there, where Super 8 takes place in the same world that Cloverfield takes place in. I mean, after all, this is 79. Cloverfield takes place in, 2009? So there's a good, 30-year difference there. And this film's primarily contained into a small rural Ohio area. Is there not much more to talk about? It really isn't, and I think I've rambled on enough about this. I do recommend you see this film. If you liked E.T., if you liked Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you'll enjoy this film. It'll be very nostalgic for you. If you didn't grow up watching those films, it's still a pretty good film. It takes its time, but at the same time, the beginning isn't overly stretched. Between when they have the first crash, not the first crash, but when the train gets derailed, which is shown in the trailer, so that's not a spoiler. When the train gets derailed, from the beginning of the film to that point, it's not that long. It's just enough to establish the characters before they really start moving with the plot. But the plot itself is paced very well, so we still get a lot of that character development throughout the film. It's not one of those where they have, long opening where it's just developing the characters and then they get to the plot. No, this film really intertwines the two very well, where it's a slow build up on the main plot and it's a slow build up on the characters, but they have a great overlap. I think other than that, it's a good film, so go see it. Signing off for now.